All right, good afternoon. Hey, I'd like to welcome everybody to the 31st DEM I Wonder webinar. DEM has so many services, offerings, programs, and hidden gems that we want to share with all of you. So we are excited to take just a few minutes each month to highlight these features in our weekly webinar. The Utah Division of Emergency Management is hosting this webinar series aimed at providing local emergency managers with relevant content and opportunities to enhance their capabilities. Webinars are live for Q&A and recorded for later viewing on the DEM website and YouTube channel. Most of these webinars are seminars or workshops with hands-on portions, which will allow emergency managers to become oriented to a DEM process or test a DEM product. So our schedule today will be as follows. We'll start with our ground rules and etiquette. Next, we'll have a brief presentation by Angela Lang on how to organize and update my EOP. Following the presentation, there will be a hands-on portion where participants will be encouraged to test out the product or process that was presented. Following the hands-on portion of our program, the presenter will be available for a Q&A session. Following the Q&A, we will close with a short message about the upcoming webinars. The ground rules today are fairly simple. Please mute your line while presenter is presenting. If you have a question, you may type it into the group chat or unmute at the appropriate time to ask your question. This session is being recorded and will be available on our website for future viewing. Thank you all for the attendance today. With that, we'll turn the time over to Angela.
Hi, everyone, and thank you, Jeff, for that warm welcome. And we will start talking about emergency operations plans, how to organize and update them. So an emergency operations plan is, and I should warn you, this is a pretty high level and basic overview of it. So I apologize if this is content that you already know, but hopefully if you do already know it, this will be a good refresher. Majority of the content in this is from the FEMA Comprehensive Preparedness Guide version 2, and I can drop a link in the chat in a little bit. So an emergency operations plan, or EOP, is a plan that defines the scope of preparedness and emergency management activities necessary for a jurisdiction during an incident. It's a plan that is flexible for incidents of all sizes and complexity. And it's a plan that identifies organizational relationships and shows how actions will be coordinated. It's also a plan that describes how people and property are protected. This includes unaccompanied minors, individuals with access and functional needs, vulnerable populations, which could include children, elderly, individuals experiencing homelessness, and those with language barriers. What does an emergency operation plan do? The EOP facilitates prevention, protection, response, and short-term recovery, which sets the stage for a successful long-term recovery. Typically, an EOP does not detail long-term recovery actions. Those are reserved for something like a recovery framework. What's included in an EOP? Typically, according to the CPG, they recommend the following sections within a plan, and this doesn't change regardless of whatever format you choose, which we'll cover in a moment. So you want to include the purpose and scope of a plan, the situation and assumptions, concepts of operations, roles and responsibilities, administration and logistics, plan development and maintenance, and then authorities and references. Certainly it's not limited to this. You can choose to incorporate other elements in your EOP, but these are just the standard elements. So there's a few different ways to format your EOP. This recognizes that there isn't a one-size-fits-all approach, but the three that the CPG recommends are a traditional functional format, an emergency support function format, and an agency department focused format. And so when you're starting to write your plan, you really want to pay attention to these formats and choose which one is most applicable to your jurisdiction. So the traditional functional format is most commonly used, and it contains the basic plan, functional annexes, and hazard, threat, or incident-specific annexes. The basic plan is an overview of the jurisdiction's preparedness and response strategies. And then the functional annexes are individual chapters that generally describe how the jurisdiction managed identified functions before and during and after an incident, as well as which agencies will implement that function. So examples of functions are community resource management, or sorry, not communities, communications, resource management, energy, financial management, etc. And then FEMA proposes about 25 functional annexes, but the format is flexible to add or delete any of those functions that wouldn't be applicable to your jurisdiction. Then for hazard, threat, or incident-specific annexes, those describe the policies, situation, concept of operations, and responsibilities for particular hazards, threats, or incidences. So are there any questions about this format? You can also stop me at any time or drop a line in the chat. So the other one, this is actually what the state of Utah uses, is the emergency support function format. This also has a basic plan, but then it has emergency support function specific annexes, then support annexes, and then hazard, threat, or incident specific annexes. The basic plan will be the same as the traditional functional format. That actually doesn't change regardless of what format you choose. And then the ESF annexes identify the primary and support agencies for each of the 15 functions. Here at the state, we actually have 16, and that can also vary depending on the size of your jurisdiction or how you organize your EOC. We include its purpose and scope, the policies, authorities, and references, and situation and assumptions, and roles and responsibilities. That's just something that we do, not something that necessarily you would want to do, but it can be done. Then the support annexes describe the framework through which a jurisdiction's departments and agencies, the private sector, nonprofit, voluntary organizations, and other non-governmental organizations coordinate and execute the common emergency management strategies. Examples of this could be like debris management or volunteer and donations management. The hazard, threat, and incident-specific annexes, those also follow the same format as the traditional functional format. And then the last, so Tammy asked, does the state have a preference requirement that we use a specific format at a county level? That's a great question, Tammy. We do not. I do get asked that quite a bit because you know, the FEMA guidance is that all of our plans work vertically and horizontally. So we would definitely want to make sure that the state EOP works vertically with your EOP, but you would want to choose a format that works best for your jurisdiction. Because if you don't have a fully staffed EOC with all of the emergency support functions, then probably the ESF format wouldn't work very well for your jurisdiction. So whatever format that you choose, you want to make sure that it works for you and can easily be implemented. And Tammy responded, thank you, the ESFs are hard to fill in smaller counties. Yeah, I would imagine it would be pretty hard to write an ESF-based plan if you aren't really operating that way. So for smaller counties, Tammy and others, this might be a good format to think about, the agency and department focused EOP. So this format addresses each department's or agency's task in a separate section and smaller communities often find this format more appropriate. This also has a basic plan, but then it has lead agencies, support agencies, and then hazard-specific procedures. Again, the basic plan follows the same as the other two formats. And then the lead agencies and support agency sections discuss the emergency functions completed by each individual departments, agencies, and non-governmental partners. So this could be like fire and law enforcement, health, emergency and medical, hospital, emergency management. It's important that each agency section refers to other agency sections to ensure coordination with their respective emergency management strategies. This format and the traditional format, so those two would be probably the best for smaller jurisdictions. And Doug said for Tammy, you can have primary response identified and others as supported. Thanks, Doug. So just to throw this out here, for those of you that have an EOP, maybe Jeff could bring up the poll. I want to find out how many of you have a traditional functional format, an ESF format, or an agency department format, or other. And if you have other, maybe you could unmute and tell us what you have.
This is Mark in Box Elder County. We're actually moving from a department base to a kind of new model I saw out there. And I'm just looking right now in the CPG 101. I thought it was mentioned in the new version. It's called Incident Support Model. And when I saw that come out, I go, that fits us. That is exactly what we need to do. So we're making that transition right now.
That's awesome. And that's actually something, so all of DEM was required to take K 2300. So we were looking at the different ways to organize your EOC, and that came up, the incident support model.
Hey, so the poll's live. Does everybody know how to use the poll? If you'll go over, there's a triangle, square, and circle in the right-hand corner, bottom corner. And if you'll just click on that and then go to polls, and then you can just answer from there. Does that make sense?
So it looks like Centerville does an ESF, so does Layton. Another ESF for San Juan. Awesome. Are there any other ones? So Mark mentioned the incident support model that fits them. Are there any other ones outside of the agency department focused, traditional, or ESF that are floating around out there? Okay, so the 6 steps of planning, once you decide on which format you want to use, then it's actually start time to planning, my favorite part. The first step is to form a planning team. You want to make sure that you get all the right people at the table. Then you want to understand the situation. What is it that you're actually planning for? And then determine your goals and objectives. What are your desired outcomes of the plan? What's your end state? Then actually develop the plans. That's getting your hands dirty and start writing. And usually it's easily done if you tackle one section at a time. And then review and approval process. You want to make sure that you get a good review and approval from all of your stakeholders, including your senior officials. That's usually key, since they're ultimately the ones responsible for incident management. And then the last step is to implement and maintain the plan. So put your plan to the test, exercise it, learn what worked in it and what didn't, and then update the plan accordingly. If it worked great, then you still need to maintain it as things change in your jurisdiction, whether it's positions, organizational responsibilities, policy modification, maybe new guidance has come out, and so on. So these steps are usually followed whether you are writing a brand new plan or if you're just updating your existing EOP. Some planning principles it takes the whole community to plan. So the planning must be community-based, representing your whole population and its needs. You need participation from your stakeholders in the community. This includes your seniors officials if possible. I think we all know that that can be really challenging sometimes, as well as individuals with access and functional needs. Sometimes the way that I look at it is, if I'm planning an event for, like my family, I could go back to when I was planning my wedding. I usually plan for the guest that has, I guess, maybe the most needs, or would maybe need the most accommodations to attend. And if I plan to that individual, then it makes it accessible for everybody else, right? So when you're looking at your plans, if you're including individuals with access and functional needs from the beginning, and finding out what needs they may require, then automatically you're covering your entire population. So you also want to have planning considerations for all hazards and threats. This ensures that when addressing emergency functions, there are identified common tasks and those who are responsible for accomplishing those tasks. Planning should be flexible enough to address both traditional and catastrophic incidences. And then they also need to be self-explanatory. So plans need to be in plain language and easy to understand. If they won't be actionable. I think what's really at least a challenge for me is that we have all of this FEMA guidance out there, and sometimes it can be just a little bit wordy or hard to understand. Some of it, not all of it, but when looking at your plans, you want to make sure that you're making it very clear and just plain language, because in the heat of the moment, if you want your plan to be actionable, you don't want to spend too much time interpreting what something actually means. And then plans should clearly identify the mission and supporting goals. So you really want to specify what are those desired results or end state. These are just some resources. Like I said, I pulled a lot of the information from the Comprehensive Preparedness Guide 101. And then there's one of the independent study courses from FEMA that I find very helpful. And the other one, which kind of leads us into our more interactive portion of this presentation, would be your neighboring communities. We've already had some discussion about which formats some of the jurisdictions are using, which is great, because then you can look at some of the demographics of your jurisdiction versus your neighboring jurisdiction, and maybe you can not reinvent the wheel, but take some pointers from your neighboring community. So one thing that I wanted to try was pulling up a Jamboard. So basically, if you haven't used it, it's like a virtual whiteboard. And I thought that we could go through some of our challenges that we face when writing or updating an EOP, but also drop in some tips that maybe somebody else hasn't thought of before, certainly that I hadn't thought of before, and see what we come up together as a group. But before we start that, while I'm pulling it up, are there any questions? Jason.
Yeah, I was just gonna see if Box Elder would maybe put up where they got that information on the incident support model, or if anyone has that. I've heard of it before. I just need to maybe find some additional information on it.
Well, yeah, let me do some digging here. I'll see if I can get some before the end of this discussion. I'm looking at a white paper on it, but there was a refresh that was done on NIMS in October of 2017, and it was mentioned in that. I'm trying to find that document. If you go back to the 2010 CPG 101. It's not mentioned there, but there was a refresh, and I saw verbiage in that. I'm trying to find that.
Thanks, Mark. I'll do some digging too.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, the only place that I have heard about it was in that K2300 course, but if there's any other places, I think that would be really helpful to everyone.
Hey, so Angela,
Mhm.
Luisa stated, I'm interested on how to write the EOP in plain language to simplify it.
Yeah, I think probably one of the most useful things I've seen is trying to get a group of people together and just seeing if they, I guess, if it's understandable in a hurry. Sometimes you find that through the planning process, especially if it's an existing one and you're updating your EOP and you get your collaborative planning team together, and then you start reading it. And if people are having too many questions about what does this mean and how do I interpret this to take action on the plan, then that probably means that you need to just make the language a little simpler and spell it out a little more clear. One thing that I really like that I'd like to start doing in our plan, we didn't have enough time in this last update to do, but adding more visuals. So something at a glance that makes it really easy to understand. Okay, so in the chat messages, I shared a jam file with you, so you should be able to have access to it. And I'm sharing it here too for those of you that aren't able to access it. And if anybody's calling just on the phone, feel free to chime in, and between Jeff and me, we can get your comments listed on this board. So I just did a sample here, divided it up into two columns. We have the EOP challenges and then the EOP tips. So if you want to add a sticky note, you just click over on the side over here and then add. So let's just say use plain language. And then you save it, and then you can just take and drag where you want it. So we're actually going to work off of this blank one, which you can change up at the top. And then you can start creating your own stickies. It doesn't really matter what color you use or anything like that. Probably just more appropriate like this side. So let's take a couple of minutes and start dropping in some sticky notes of some challenges and tips. So feel free to continue adding some sticky notes, but we can talk about some of these that have already been dropped in. So reoccurring training of new EOC members and their ESFs. That is a challenge that we face as well. The turnover that we have in our state emergency response team, it is really a challenge to keep everybody up to date all the time. And it feels like a never-ending process. Has anybody, we haven't done this yet for us, but has anybody considered, maybe making a video tutorial so you could just share a link and they could just watch that so you're not constantly training, or maybe even creating a executive summary that you could give them along with the full plan, but just kind of that boilerplate. The other one, getting active involvement, making the EOP your own and reading it and not boilerplating everything. Yeah, active involvement. That is really tricky. The best thing that I know is to provide food, but that's not always possible, right? You say, oh, I'll provide lunch, and then all of a sudden everybody feels very engaged. But without bribing people, how do you get people actively involved? How do you get them? How do you sell emergency operations planning to other people? Has anybody had success with getting active involvement besides food?
Hey, Angela, I'm going to just speak up here. I can't figure out how to post a note on my desk with a piece of paper, let alone on the computer. But, you know, one of the things that when you look at trying to get consensus and stuff with this here, I've found, you know, so many people are out there, they're so busy, and to expect that they've got the big picture, they don't. So what I've done is in cases, and found it fairly successful, is I come up with the overarching kind of principle or concept of kind of what's going to happen in the plan. However, I need to have input on specific spots, and then I just to take specific segments to particular individuals or entities within my community to either validate what I've written or you know get some better clarification. But trying to bring everybody together to do a plan is horrible. It's, you know, I've just found it more painful because trying to build a plan by committee is excruciating. That's just kind of my experience.
Yeah, that's really good advice. Recently, I was able to see what Salt Lake County was doing with their comprehensive emergency plan, and they did something really similar. They created a comment matrix, and then everybody was assigned a certain section to review and look at. So it wasn't everybody was reviewing the entire, I don't know, 200-page plan. Or however many pages it was, but it was really tailored to what their subject matter expertise was. Thank you, Mark.
Angela, this is Doug. I really liked the way Ryan Perkins, he was the emergency manager for Ogden City, and he was able to get his folks, break them out by ESF function, bring those people in and train them quarterly, just in sections. And I thought that was really good, and use, of course, his EOP plan as part of the baseline training for them. That gave reoccurring folks reoccurring training. And then it also, one of the things I really enjoyed, he says he and his wife would bake some treats that even tantalized him to attend the training. So anyway, I just like the way he did that, and trying to adopt that here for our city locale too.
That's great. Thanks, Doug. And see, food does work. And it doesn't always have to be catered. It can be baked. Mark also has a chat. I've rewritten my EOP twice in 6 years based on EOP boilerplates. Ended up with great looking plans, but they were garbage because it wasn't really how we would operate. So when I found this new model, it looked to fit us better, and I'm filling in as I see it. Yeah, I think that really is important. At the end of the day, you need a plan that works for you. If you're using these boilerplates, then it does meet the requirement, but does it actually make it useful for you? And it sounds like Tammy's in the same boat, that the plans look great, but it wasn't a very feasible way to function.
So I can give you an example. Ever since I took over and looked at the EOP plans and the ESF functions, I always worry about those because it's hard to fill those. And I do know if you have a big event in your area, there was one year we had the bus crash down by Mexican Hat, and we'd been out all night. By 8:30 the next morning, the NTSB was in our office and they took our EOP plan. So my concern is always making sure your EOP plan is what you say you can do, because they will come take your plans and look at them and make sure that you're doing what you said you would do in your plan.
Yeah, that's a great point. Not only do our plans tell us or, guide us how we should respond, but they also, to some extent, hold us accountable, right? Let's see, I have to zoom this one up. So another challenge is, contrary to popular belief, each annex does not need to be a complete plan in and of itself. If you try to, and you do it that way, by the time you are through, your plan is about 1,000+ pages long, and certainly is more confusing than helpful. Yeah, I think sometimes less is more, for sure, and we're still learning that ourselves, because it does feel like each of our annexes, you could take it out and it's its own complete plan. It's a plan within a plan, and it gets confusing and daunting. Gaining consensus on the elements of a plan. So I think when you are writing these plans, part of your position is to play a little bit of mediator at times. Has anybody been in that kind of position, and do you have any advice for that? Or does anybody have an example of when maybe you had some people in the planning process not really agree with different parts of the plan? Oh, go ahead, Mark.
Well, again, just I guess it goes back to just the experience that I've had, and that is, getting people to weigh in on the big picture of stuff that they really don't understand about has always been kind of that problem. Like I say, not very many people in my pool of folks that we've done planning understands the big picture, and it just convolutes it. So, like I said, I guess I see it as emergency manager to come up with that initial draft of the big picture, and then let them help hone specific pieces. But again, it takes us back to that whole thing of getting people with making comments or being involved that don't really know what they're talking about, and just get wadded up and have a lot of time burnt running around the tree over terminology or this or that or the other. It can get painful.
Yeah, I think some of the planning pitfalls I have made is having too big of a group look at the entire plan section by section, and then it gets so tedious because we're wordsmithing everything and not looking at that bigger picture. Whereas if you have something already on paper that you could take to somebody as a draft and have them look at the sections that would mainly involve them, that does seem to help. And then you don't have other people that, because I've found in some planning meetings, you'll have people where that section doesn't even necessarily apply to them, and then they start weighing in, and it's really hard to get that consensus. You have too many cooks in the kitchen, so to speak. So this is great, because I think that there's probably more EOP tips than there are challenges. So some of the tips that we have is change your plan to fit your agency. We've talked a lot about that with the incident support model, changing it that way, or not doing an ESF format because that doesn't actually fit well with your jurisdiction. It's hard to fill all of those ESFs seats in your EOC, and so that's not really how you're going to function, so you don't want your plan to be written that way. Working on a plan one section at a time, we just talked about. Exercise the plan and ideas to see if it works. That is really, really important, because you don't want to just write the plan and then say, okay, I checked that box, but then you don't even know if it works, and then an incident happens, and maybe it didn't, there were crucial elements of the plan that didn't work at all. And had you exercised it, you could have saved yourself a lot of pain. Cast a wide net on potential stakeholders. I don't know who submitted that one, but do you want to speak a little bit more to that one? Anybody? Maybe it was Jason, he jumped off.
Hi, it was Max. Just just trying to make sure that everything's looked at globally to make sure that, you know, you're picking up all the elements that you need to have. That's all I meant by that.
Yeah, thank you. And something that we just talked about on my planning team was perceived stakeholders. So I think I see Skylar on here. Could you maybe mention a little bit about what perceived stakeholders would be, kind of along lines of casting a wide net on potential stakeholders? If he hears this, Skylar, feel free to jump in. But so you would be looking at stakeholders that maybe aren't the obvious ones, but they would be the people that they believe that they have, I guess, a dog in the fight, so to speak. So when you're looking at all of your stakeholders, don't just look at the the lead agencies and the supporting agencies. Also look at anybody else who could potentially be impacted by it and who may think that they could be impacted by the plan. And it's something that a lesson learned from COVID at the state level was in our emergency operations plan, we actually didn't account for the role of the Governor's Office of Management and Budget, which is now the Governor's Office of Planning and Budget. And they ended up getting really involved in the beginning of COVID. And we don't have them anywhere in our plan. And so they would have been one of our stakeholders that we just didn't identify. And now we know definitely to include them. So had they been included in the forefront, that coordination could have been a little bit easier than it was. So some of the other tips, it looks like a lot of different EOP examples are out there on the internet. There are many ways to make the plan fit for your jurisdiction. Yeah, definitely. You can also, aside from just the internet, even if you feel like there aren't other neighboring counties that match your demographic, look to other states and maybe they are willing to share their plans with you so you can see what's out there. And then never place person's name, only position update. Editing is too high. Absolutely. I deal a lot with this in continuity of operations plans where everybody lists the person's name and the changeover is just too much. You really just want to put the position. That's great advice. Let's see, I have to zoom this up a little bit. Use checklists within your plan. In the heart of the disaster, people don't have time to read the plan. Rather, they need a simple checklist or bullet points, which outlines duties and tasks within the plan. Absolutely, that's something I wish we were better at. We have checklists, but they're not really combined with the EOP. And so it would be a little bit easier to have the checklist and then you could just tear it out of the plan. And that would make it much more actionable. And that's pretty similar to creating position-specific task lists and that support the plan. Oh, and Skylar, thanks. We were just talking about, for the EOP tips, cast a wide net on potential stakeholders, and I was trying to explain the perceived stakeholders that we were talking about in our team. So I don't know if there's anything that you'd like to elaborate with that.
Yeah, part of that just kind of goes back to, I guess, the point Mark made with breaking pieces out, but trying to assess all your stakeholders up front. So that you don't have a nearly complete plan and somebody comes in and just wrecks your whole thing and you basically have to nearly start over. So assessing all your stakeholders and reassessing as you're going through and developing your plan will prove very beneficial.
Yeah, thank you, Skylar. And then understand your EOP as a living document and recognize and capture changes frequently to keep the plan up to date. And that is so true. Just because your plan is promulgated from X year to X year doesn't mean that you're not continually working on it and updating it. Because anytime something happens, you should be able to go back to the plan and update it according to any lessons learned, whether it's an incident or an exercise or whatever. You need to give yourself that flexibility to update the EOP. And that goes with know your plan and take it off the shelf and read it. That is key to making it the difference from just a plan that checks a box and a plan that is useful. And you also have to make sure that you socialize the plan. So that was one of the challenges that I threw out there, was that you need to socialize the plan. It does nobody any good if just you have it. You need to make sure that everybody else has access to it, they know where to find it, and hopefully that they read it.
And Angela, just the one EOP tip that I saw out there, I thought that was very good. Whoever posted that up was the use checklist within your plan. I really think that's a great idea, especially for incident management in sections of the EOC, to be able to have all that and coordinate that well. So I thought that was very good. I don't know if Mark's new model he's looking at, if it involves the checklist or not, but it's always been helpful.
It's the one thing about this is the checklists have not been developed because it's relatively new. So it's in folks are probably doing that. It probably wouldn't take that much to migrate some of those checklists out of some of the, because what it does is just basically takes pieces out of the ICS model that is more EOC focused, and you could probably pull those checklists out and kind of update them and modify them. But there is not a lot that's developed on these yet, and that's all I'm looking to do is just kind of move, pick these checklists and migrate them over, amend them as needed.
And to that end, Tammy said in the chat, so it would be a hybrid plan.
I think that's probably a good way to describe it. I think whoever thought about it, and like I said, I put in the chat here that it actually, where I first saw it was coming the updated NIMS in 2017 is where that first was shown, and it's actually in that document. And so I think it is kind of a hybrid of that. But what it does is it just takes out of the ICS structure the things that are specifically done in an EOC, because ICS does, just you don't do all those boxes that much in the EOC unless you're a big EOC. But for us small ones, there's just too much, and so you just take those components out that actually fits what an EOC does operationally.
Yeah, most definitely.
Mark, would you be willing to share what you have so far?
Well, I've got a lot of potholes in mine. I'm still writing. I'm not a fan of writing, so it's easier to do other things, than that. But I need to get that finished up. So I don't know that I have much of an end user example yet. I've got kind of a minefield as I'm filling stuff in. But I apologize.
Karina, I saw your hand up. Do you still have a question or comment?
Okay, my comment was that I'm Karina Bowe. I'm newly elected tribal chairwoman for the Paiute Indian Tribe of Utah. We have bands, we have chairs in all the different locations. In Iron, Sevier, Beaver, Sevier, Iron, and Washington. So we're trying to get a plan, and we have some that are outdated, and everything, but we're really not sure how to get our plan going and how to connect the plan with the city. So does anybody have any recommendations?
So if I understand it correctly, are you looking to see how your plan can work vertically with the city's plan?
Yes, kind of like that, because we need to be connected to each of the towns. I know that Shivwitz has worked really good with Washington County. The others haven't really had a reason to work with the county yet. So we need to be connected somehow to the county or to, I'm not sure. We haven't really done our plan. I mean, we've done drafts of it, but then we kind of, they stopped wanting to meet and it kind of got put on the back burner. But with the flooding here in Iron County, they started wanting to, maybe we need to look at doing an emergency operation plan.
Something she may want to look at is our partners at the university levels have a different type of plan and go through similar concerns trying to fit the university plan either into a city or a county plan. As well as one of the challenges Utah State University up here is facing is they have satellite facilities in 29 different counties in the state of Utah. How does the university plan interface with both city plans and county plans? Don't have any answers for that other than you basically do need to sit down with a lot of different organizations, both as you write the plan and practice the plan so that you're playing off the same sheet of music. If it doesn't happen under blue skies, it certainly isn't going to happen when the disaster strikes. And so both the planning process and the exercising process need to go whole community, if I can use that term, just like city and county plans do.
Yeah, absolutely. So something that you could do, Karina, would maybe have a workshop that would involve those different stakeholders from the counties and the cities to start discussing how you guys will respond together cohesively and coordinated. And I know that it's also a challenge, especially with the tribe, because you can work with the counties and the state and also go straight to the federal government. So you definitely have unique challenges that way. I also know, have you already been attending those UTURC meetings with Anna Boynton?
We are starting to, we're asking her to come up and start training again because, like I said, it hasn't been done for a few years. So I'm thinking that we need to update our plans and we need to make sure that our plans are in place.
Yeah, that would definitely be good. And I think that I've only attended a couple of the UTURC meetings, but discussing with other tribes too, maybe they have a template, and I can also share with you some of the resources that I have offline too, if you're able to give me your email address, or I can work through Anna.
Okay, so some great discussions, great tips, great advice throughout this webinar. So we want to thank Angela again for her presentation today. As a reminder, this webinar and all other webinars in this series will be available on the DEM website at dem.utah.gov/exercises. And now it's at the dem.utah.gov/iwonder as well. So our next webinar will be held in September, and I'll send a reminder email out. the Monday before, and it'll be presented by our Be Ready Utah team. If any of you have any I Wonder topic suggestions, please reach out to me at jeffrankham@utah.gov to have your topics added to our calendar. We're always excited to help you explore and get to know all that DEM can offer the emergency management community. And until then, keep wondering.